Okay, welcome everyone to, I guess, the tail end of the day. Thank you for joining. I'm here as a representative of Morphir. Morgan Stanley contributed Morphir a couple years back to FINOS, and one of the main reasons that we did so was to maybe spur some collaborations. It was our hope that like-minded projects would take a look and realize that there's added value to collaborating on this similar kind of technologies. It's interesting that when you go into open source, you quickly find out that a lot of people have already thought of a lot of the things that you've already thought of. And it can be, I guess, a little nerve-wracking, and at the same time, it's also satisfying because you realize that it's probably a pretty good idea if people have come to the same conclusions, maybe from different angles. And so, we contributed it to FINOS specifically so that we could increase collaboration. And I'm happy to be up here with Damian Reeves from Capital One because this is the epitome of what FINOS is really about. We contributed Morphir a couple years ago, and then over 2022, Capital One picked up Morphir as a project and became an equal contributor. So, Damian is a maintainer, and it is no longer a Morgan Stanley contributed project anymore. It is actually a pure FINOS project with multiple contributors, and that's exactly what we wanted to happen. And so, let me get out of your way and then introduce Damian from Capital One.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So, hello. My name is Damian Reeves. I'm a distinguished engineer, and I work for Capital One. That company that talks about your wallet. I love functional programming and languages, compilers, domain-specific languages, and open source software in general. I've got a real passion for this, and let's see. I'm also, Stephen just said, maintainer of FINOS projects. I contribute to Morphir Scala, Morphir JVM, and coming soon, Morphir Rust and Morphir Go. Really ambitious, but what Steve just talked about is we are no longer in the place where we just have a single financial institution leading this effort. I think we've heard throughout this day various people talking about Morphir and the value add. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the fact that we know that there is a place and a space, it means that there's also really excited people who want to contribute and help to broaden the Morphir ecosystem. So today's journey that we're going to go down, we're going to go through Hello Morphir. I'm going to get a little geeky, so excuse me. It's not going to be too geeky, but I'll introduce Morphir to you. I'm going to introduce this Morphir IR that has been talked about, show you some of the pieces, what differentiates it from some things you may have worked with already, talk a little bit about the Morphir ecosystem and why I think it's important and it's beneficial to invest in Morphir as a platform. So let's see. All right, let's make a case for Morphir. So really, what is Morphir? Morphir allows you to leverage the power of your business logic by storing, right, sharing, and translating and visualizing it, right? So fair warning, we're talking about business logic, all right? So don't fall asleep. We talked about regulations, so I think if I talk about business logic, we'll stay awake. But are you excited yet? Come on. It's all right, it's 4:15, we had our coffee. All right, what do we mean? So what is Morphir? Morphir is a set of tools for integrating technologies. You can find this on our fact sheet. Morphir is composed of this library of tools that facilitates the digestion of business logic into multiple different languages. It's a mouthful. We're going to get a little bit deeper into what exactly that means. But I want us to really focus on why is this important. And it's important because Morphir makes your business logic portable. And it does it by turning your business logic into data. This enables you to move your business logic across systems, across departments, organizations. It allows you to go across boundaries. I'll give an example, and maybe raise your hand or react if you've ever been in this situation where you have one team who had to code up some business rules, perhaps some compliance rules, and you had a compliance back end that had to enforce that rule. And the compliance back end was in some technology. But you also wanted to have a front end for that. And guess what? You want to maybe, before you send over bad data, you want to validate it. So guess what? You code the same business rules in a front end language. That is part of what Morphir is about. It's about capturing the business logic one time and taking out that error-prone re-effort and duplication. What else can we say about Morphir? Well, it's important because business logic, when it encoded as data, can also be converted to new languages and applications. It allows for the use of existing and future tools. What do you mean by future tools? I'm going to get into the ecosystem a little bit more, but tools that you haven't built yet, right? Remember, this is data. And the thing we know about data is once you've captured data, right? If you've got a teenager, once the data's out there, the data doesn't go anywhere. But once we have something in data, even though we don't have a tool that might be able to visualize, that might be able to convert, today, those future tools can exist. I talked about Morphir on Go or Morphir in Rust. It's not just about what exists today. And I want you, as I speak today, to remember that this is an open platform at an open source, financial summit. You can contribute in your own way. So don't feel restricted by any of the tools we present. It's open and it's an open platform. So how does it work? So Morphir defines a standard format for storing and sharing your business logic. And Morphir provides APIs, it provides tools, it integrates technologies. And once your business logic is converted into this developer-friendly data, it's easy to integrate and assimilate it into your stack, right? It's stack agnostic. And once again, I'm going to underscore, though there may be choices that have been made today, part of why we are a member of FINOS is that the choices that have been made, it's only because of resources, right? It's only because of someone has to pick something, but I think the platform is open enough. So what's the benefit? Morphir eliminates technical debt. I'm going to go through these kind of quick. It ensures correctness. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Morphir IR and what are some of the fundamentals of it, but I mentioned at the beginning that I love functional programming, and in functional programming we have this idea of purity, and then sometimes it gets us in trouble a bit, but it's about what you put in is only, or what you get out of a calculation is only in relation to what you put in. And that's really what your calculations and your business logic is all about. The fact that you run it on a Spark cluster, or you run it in Azure, or you run it in AWS, or you send a message out to a queue, that is really an integration problem. It is not really the core of your business logic. But we duplicate effort, we re-implement systems, we rewrite business logic all the time because, well, now I need it on AWS instead of Azure. Now I want to run it in Lambda. Now I want to run it in some Java or Python system. And Morphir's idea is let's capture the business logic in a way that, first of all, is strict. I think functional programming is a strict and very direct way of doing it. You don't really need side effects in your business logic. Though we do it all the time, and I'm sure some of you have been involved in systems where in the middle of doing a business logic calculation that you call out to a database, what we've learned over time is if we want to scale, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. And so if you want to embrace things and make sure things are correct, you just capture it once and then push everything to the edge. So it increases agility because you're able to just capture this one time, and the knowledge is able to be disseminated. I'm at the end, so I have the ability to refer to what came before me. We saw a wonderful talk about how Morphir, along with Legend and Databricks, was able to make a full integration pipeline, and I think that's the sort of things that we can look forward to in the Morphir ecosystem. So let's talk a little bit more about this thing that I keep mentioning, the Morphir IR. And it may seem a little intimidating, this IR notion, but let's try to break it down, because this is really the centerpiece of what is Morphir. It is the definition, really, and Morphir is really about this IR, or this data format, right? IR is a programming language term that means intermediate representation, and at its heart, Morphir is kind of like this set of tools, but in the midst of it is this format. And Morphir embraces functional domain modeling. And the Morphir IR enables users to model your domain and model your business logic. It means sit with your business users, talk about what it means to calculate whatever you're trying to calculate, be it the LCR, take a specification. And Morphir is about capturing that and then encapsulating it in the form of code and data. So what are the properties of Morphir? It's pure functional. So it allows front-end languages to encode data types as functions and ADTs, abstract data types. What we found are, as I said, I'm biased. I'm a functional programming guy. What I find is that you're able to make illegal states not representable when you're able to talk about things in terms of functions and abstract data types, records and option types, and you don't have null anywhere in the Morphir ecosystem, but you can instead, usually when you want null, what you want is optionality. So we support that as part of Morphir. Morphir is strongly typed, right? There's not going to be any loose type, because the reason we are able to operate at the data level is because we tell you something, and you're able to extrapolate and make a decision based on that type. Morphir is modular. This is a really important thing, because you're able to take different pieces from different ecosystems and connect them together. I can allow your imagination to drift, if you would, where you've got an accounting system and you need to define yet another representation of an accounting journal and an accounting ledger. And then you realize, why am I doing this? Because accounting has been around for hundreds of years, but I've got to do it one more time. An organization like FINOS, right, could be an umbrella with something like Morphir, where you can have your accounting ledger module. You can have rules. You can maybe have people who know what are the regulations that you're worried about and have a module that you can import, and it's part of an ecosystem. So that's part of what the Morphir IR with its modularity gives you. It gives you logic as values. I'm going to say that again. It gives you logic as values. I'll key in a little bit on what that means. Logic and values means that it's a differentiator, because usually when we're talking about modeling data, modeling services, then you pretty much stop there. You stop at, what is the schema? What is the shape? What is the contract? But Morphir allows you to go one step deeper, because now you can save the actual logic, how you make decisions, what are the rules, along with your schema, along with your data. And it's distributable. So I can package that up and I can ship it. I can put it in a GitHub repository. I'll talk a little bit about how we're looking to broaden the packaging ecosystem of Morphir. I'm not going to say it now because I would be going ahead of myself. And controversial, I use the term complete, because Morphir is complete. What I mean by that is, it's not that we're done. What I mean is that you're able to take the formats that you do know today, formats like Avro, formats, all those other formats that you work with, and those can potentially be generated from Morphir because it's high enough and it's powerful enough. And I'm going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds, and what do I mean? I'm going to introduce you. I'm not going to show all the flashy demos. I'm going to go into the details of why Morphir is valuable. So it has, at its type level, and this is where you can do schema, right? You can represent, this is how powerful Morphir is. You can talk about things like a list, but you're not just doing list of string. Morphir is powerful enough to allow you to represent generics. And you might not be familiar with some of these other platforms, generics is something that's usually often overlooked. You can have references to types. You can have tuples. Often those are results that you get from databases. You can have records. Everything has a record. This extensible record thing is almost like a functional programmer's take on interfaces. And of course, you've got functions. Lots and lots of functions. Forget about unit. There's only one of those, but it's needed. And then you've got values. Now, I'll say all that stuff, particularly records, you're probably used to that. When you go to your database, you say, here's my schema, and that's really a record structure. But Morphir allows you to go a little bit further. And how it goes further is it allows you to say, all right, here's all the different values. And you can, I'm just going to let you look at this a little, talk a little bit about, you can do all those things at the value levels. What does it mean to be at the value level? This is the body of your function. And this is the real difference. Because if I take any other format, I'm going to have a little service thing, and it says I take in an int, and I spit out an int. Or I have an add function, I take in an int, and I spit out, and I take in another int, and I spit out an int. What Morphir is going to say is it's actually a plus b that's in there. It stores it in a format that when you're ready, you can turn a plus b into a calculation in Python, in TypeScript, in Scala, in whatever language you want to work with. And you can do that through all the types, lists, records. You can refer to something, which means that you can potentially refer to something that exists in a module, and that's how we support modularization. All those sorts of things, access fields, call functions, lambdas. I show all this to really overwhelm you. I show all it to show that you can do everything in your business logic, because you've probably seen all this. You're like, I'm different. My use case is broader, is bigger, but you've got a very powerful language, right? So you got all that? Cool? There's going to be a quiz at the end. So what am I really saying? Morphir is not just another IDL. What do I mean? It's not just another interface definition language. Morphir is more. And what's at the center of that is also the Morphir ecosystem. And that ecosystem is really why I'm here. So the tool and story with Morphir is you'll hear it all the time if you talk to someone from the Morphir team or engage with the project, that you take a front end, you do this process, you kind of make Morphir IR, and then you do transformation. And when you do your transformation, you can transform to Scala, transform to TypeScript, transform to JSON schema, transform to a fancy visualization that looks really good at a conference, amen, or you can even do more. Whatever it is, right? You can do reports. You can do all sorts of things like that. All right. So with Morphir, you model your problem domain. You transform what you've modeled into data. Now you store that, your business models, and then you use it. And I'll talk a little bit about the ecosystem, then I'm going to talk about why I think we should invest. The ecosystem is ever broadening. I remember in 2020 when Morphir was open sourced that we really had like Morgan Stanley and a strict set of tools, but there's more in the works. So with Capital One and team at Capital One, we've been working on Morphir Scala. Morphir already had Scala tooling. It allowed you to generate Scala, but we're looking to do deeper integration. We're actually working on a compiler plugin, which will allow you to model, if you use Scala as your programming language, that you'll be able to write Scala. You'll get Morphir out just like how you can do currently in the Scala ecosystem. You can write Scala, target the JS platform, write Scala, target native platform, and we're working on write Scala, target Morphir as a platform. We already have Morphir Elm, a lot of the ecosystems there. Morphir Go, it's one of those things along with Rust and even .NET that will allow you to do things to target those ecosystems and eventually, we hope, WebAssembly. And then we even got this other repo to the side, which is about Morphir editor or whatever, but what it is this ecosystem of tools and needs exist, and in the open, right, because it's not just one company funding all this, we're able to do that. So why? Whoop. Yeah, particularly Go. Go is not really good with those constructs. So there's some design going into how Go does support generics as of this year, by the way. I'm gonna try to leave some time for questions. So why invest in Morphir, and why is Capital One investing in Morphir? Well, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Capital One as a company. We believe in open source. I think the term we use is we're all in on open source. As an organization, we believe in standards and standardization. We've got business rules all over the place. In Capital One, your organization probably is the same. And we believe in innovation. And because of all that, I've actually been allowed to work on a business problem, but to work on it in a way where I'm able to use an open source technology like Morphir. And so we invest in Morphir because we know it gives us increased power. So I work on a platform where we had our own DSL. And we wanted to give more power to that DSL. We wanted to expand the capabilities that our business users could have. And we had a choice. We can maybe use one of the systems that exist that maybe isn't as pure, didn't really follow the principles that we believe in. I work on something where being correct is really important. So we already embrace functional patterns, and Morphir's focus on correctness was important for us. But we needed more power than what our DSL provided. And we could have started from scratch. But being open source first, one of the things that we like to do at Capital One is look, is there something that does what we want to do? And Morphir fit that build. We wanted to expand on modularity. We wanted to be able to have one part of the business define rules and procedures and calculations, and have another part of our business use that and wrap it, extend it to incorporate it in what they're doing. Security is important. Morphir, because it's closed, because it's not just a scripted engine, right? I've talked about all this. It's not just a scripted engine. With scripted engines, you suddenly find yourself where you've got a scripted engine and maybe you've got some login, and you find that in December you're suddenly trying to squash some sort of bug because you're able to do scripting. Anybody remember last year? Well, there's no security holes because, once again, it's pure functional. What you put in is what you get out. And we wanted discipline, constraints, and we wanted an ecosystem. And we found that in Morphir. And now, because of this, we looked at this, we said, listen, we can build this from scratch, or we can contribute, and we can get all the power of an expanding ecosystem, because if we did this from scratch, I'll tell you what, we wouldn't get Legend integration. We wouldn't get Databricks integration. And whatever the community has around the corner, we wouldn't get it. But we recognize that if we contribute back in the spirit of open source, then we can get benefit, and we can benefit others, and we can build on the ecosystem. So I'll talk a little bit about what my team and what myself personally is working on. We're working on Morphir Scala. I talked about it, where we're going to bring the Morphir IR and all its types. We're going to do that Scala 3 compiler plugin that I spoke about. We're bringing an interpreter, which allows you to take Morphir. Right now, you've seen Morphir running in the web applications. You've seen it maybe running at a command line. You're going to be able to run Morphir directly in the JVM. Morphir, just to be clear, right now you can compile and generate Morphir code that runs on the JVM, but this is about directly taking Morphir models in real time, running them on the JVM platform in a secure manner, because you don't have to deal with all the things of jars or things reaching out to libraries. That's really important to us, because with Morphir's data, what it means is that if you've got not just hundreds, but you've got thousands of variations of business rules. You want to version all that stuff. You want to be able to load it on the fly if you have maybe millions of customers that have little slight variations on how they use, I don't know, something like a credit card. That's really important, and this is what Morphir allows us to do. Other things we're working on, workspaces, which are around packaging, and the extensible CLI. And yeah, that's basically it. I just want to say thanks to the Morphir and FINOS teams, Stephen Goldbaum, Tilla Mahali, the entire Morphir team, the FINOS team, and I want to also say thanks to the great team of engineers at Capital One and the leaders at Capital One and a very open and awesome open source program office. And thanks. I know I don't have much time, but Q&A?
Go for it. You had a question?
Yeah, so that's one of those things where we've looked at, and for someone like me, I love languages. I love programming languages, so I'm involved in a lot of those projects. And yes, part of why we look at languages that kind of have principles or at the heart, the same tenets as Morphir, which is why Scala was one of the first ones. I'll be very honest. Go, I was hesitant for, but Go has a pretty big presence at Capital One. So I kind of begrudgingly started the effort of seeing what it would look like to integrate Morphir. What's also interesting is, remember, Morphir has basically a front end where you can author something, and then you have a back end which is about execution. So you can actually not even author it in Go, but just use Go as an execution platform. And Go and Rust as execution platforms, they actually open up the door for you to run on WebAssembly, which allows you to run basically anywhere. Yeah. I think it's going to differ a little bit based on your use case, but there is a lot of use cases that we've seen where you do want to just kind of dynamically load. But from a security standpoint, the minute you say dynamically load, there's all sorts of issues that get unlocked. So the idea then is, if we have this runtime interpreter of this very closed loop, then you're able to have dynamicism without security holes. So I do think it's a big future. It's actually the principle behind why WebAssembly has taken off. So I think that Morphir can benefit and learn lessons from that.
It's also an age-old, balance across all of tech programming. We've always had interpreted systems, users defining query rules at runtime versus compiled systems with unit tests, and there's always a balance of when do you want to use one or the other, and it really comes down to the context and use case. Right, just to repeat, so what Dove was saying is that the tension between interpreting at runtime versus compiling is that you can make changes to things like regulations at runtime and push those out. Whether that's a good idea is really up to the business, right? Like, for example, you might have traders who would like to create rules. Is that really the best thing to happen? Or should we actually unit test the kind of rules that a trader would build before we're allowed to let them push those out? So those are really business context questions. I think the important thing is that you've got the option for both. You could take that same model and interpret it at runtime, or you could compile it down.
Yeah, and we've seen examples where there's a desire to separate the platform on which the thing executes from the rules and the logic that it's being executed. And once again, I've probably said security a lot of times, but doing that in a safe manner, right? Being able to do it is not any huge achievement. You can take a scripted engine, you can deploy that in your application, and just let the hackers and security holes creep in. Or you can do it in a very secure sandbox environment. And that's what the interpreted play, I shouldn't say play, but the interpreted position, I think, for Morphir, it adds value in that you have a sandbox, safe execution environment. And it's something that, for your organization, if you got a security group, that they're gonna ask, oh, can I talk to a database? Can I write to the file? You can't do any of that from Morphir. It doesn't even have the concept of that. And that's part of the power. You still have all the power to do everything at the business logic level, but you can't do the bad stuff. There's no launching missiles in the middle of your calculation. And I think that is all my time. I can get one more question.
This is a little nitpicky, perhaps. I know you kind of put this together with records, but it looked like there was no sum type in the list of types.
That is an oversight on my part.
Just to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody hears. So the question was, are there some types? And some types being, you go ahead and explain it.
Some types being like unions, being able to express the idea of a choice, like A or B or C. And sorry, that's an oversight. Morphir actually includes some types.
It's an important part. Actually, the IR is full of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We totally agree. We love some types.
Yeah,
some types are the ability to say, hey, look, I'm getting a message that's of this format, like a trade request message, which has these 10 fields, versus maybe I'm getting a trade cancel message, which just has one field, the ID of a field. And through pattern matching, your code goes and figures out, well, what do I do with that? But a lot of languages don't have that, but it is a very powerful functional feature.
Yeah, and I skipped over that, but I went through it quickly, but we support pattern matching and all those things as well. Well, thank you so much for your interest, and of course, you can check out morphir.finos.org. Thank you.